I don't normally go to a lot of big Magic events. Or at least I didn't until 2018 or so. So yeah, from 95 to 2018, that's a long time. And I didn't really go to big events much during that time frame. My biggest event, I think, during that time frame was the Theros pre-release at Cool Stuff Maitland, which was just over 100 people, I think. And that was vastly bigger than anything I'd been to before. Oh, I'd probably been to, a lot of events with 20 to 25 people. Yeah, lots of those. Maybe a few with more than that. But there's a big jump between that and, 100 people. And I had never been to something like a Grand Prix. These days they call it MagicFest. But at the time, 2018, they were calling it a Grand Prix. So I hadn't been to one, and Grand Prix Las Vegas had a reputation of being the largest event anywhere in the world for Magic. It was just huge. I think 2015 was one of the record-breaking years, and 16 and 17 were similarly large. So for 2018, Daniel Chang from Vintage Magic found out that I hadn't ever been to a big event, and he invited me to join him and his crew for Grand Prix Vegas 2018. Sounded fun. If I was going to go to, a big Magic event, I thought, well, I might as well go to the biggest one in the world, right? And since I was invited, I went ahead and accepted that. It took some work to get my schedule to fit that. I was particularly busy at the time. I'm busy most of the time. But I really wanted to go. And he was going to have Rudy from Alpha Investments, Open Boosters from Open Boosters, Edwin from Edwin the Magic Engineer. They were all going to be there hanging out at the booth. Brian Weissman, the legendary Magic player, he was going to be there at the booth a lot. Obviously, Daniel from Vintage Magic, he was going to be there. I knew that the professor was going to spend some time with us there at the booth, and various other people would stop by. And Daniel wanted me to be there entertaining people with these other people. So, yeah. I was there for historical information and card authentication. I helped him look through cards when he was buying collections, make sure everything was legit. And just visited with a lot of people. We were going to do some videos on misprints and things like that. Maybe we'll still get to that. And, just share my knowledge, History, misprints, all the stuff that I do, authentication. I just fit in with all the other people and entertain the crowd. We made a lot of videos, and that's pretty much, what he's there for, making money and selling stuff and buying stuff and making videos to entertain people. It was a lot of fun. I got to, meet all these people and hang out. I knew some of them before, like, I'd seen Rudy and Open Boosters and Edwin before, and Daniel. So, yeah, I went, saw everything, had a great time. We worked a lot. It's a lot of work running a booth. We didn't start as early as most people there. We came fashionably late and worked, and then we went to go find food, and then we crashed in the hotel room. So that's pretty much how it went. It was a lot of work, but it was a great time. It was the 25th anniversary of Magic, which was pretty awesome. They had, cake and stuff. I could go into that maybe another time. We were invited to the VIP party and all kinds of stuff. Met a ton of people that I'd only known from online, and just pretty much thoroughly enjoyed myself. It was a lot of work. I didn't get to play many games of Magic. I actually, while I was there, I think I only played one game. It was an old school game in the hotel room. We invited people to the room and hung out. And that particular game was against Jonas Twitchen, and I thoroughly enjoyed that game. Thank you, Jonas. I'm sure it was just a game for you, but it meant a lot to me to get to play because it was the only game I got to play for that trip. I didn't have a deck. I had to borrow someone's. I was really, really busy building a Jurassic Park Jeep leading up to the event, and I was spending like every waking minute working on that project, trying to get it complete before I left, and unfortunately I didn't get it complete before I left, but I still got to go on the trip, so thank you to my wife for letting me go on the trip. Yeah, so I had a great time. I know I'm going on and on here, but on the final day, cleaning up, I decided to purchase this playmat as kind of a memento of the occasion. And I also picked up some card sleeves. Let me see if I got one here. There we go. I got some card sleeves. I had to get 2 packages because they come in packs of 50. Like, it's not just these. Like, it's very common for sleeves to come in packages of 50. It's kind of crazy. Like, why do you do that? 50 sleeves? Decks are 60 cards. And, 15 cards for a sideboard. You could have 75 card packs and people would be pretty happy. But anyway, I had to get 2 packs of sleeves so that I would have enough for a deck. Because, when we're all hanging out together, the whole crew, and we're going to be playing Magic or something, it's neat to have similarly sleeved decks and similar playmats. And it's kind of like a uniform or something, Some old school groups, they have jackets they wear, or playmats, or pins, things like that. So it's just a fun thing to sort of unify the team while we're there together, hanging out. So yeah, I picked those up, and that's where I got this. This is, I guess this is my, if you count my beach towel as my first playmat from back in the 90s, and my old school championship playmat as my next playmat, this would be the playmat that I got after that. So, yep, summer 2018 playmat. So that's where this came from. My next playmat after that would be my Misprint Con playmat, which I have 2 of, one signed and one not signed, and then the Gen Con 2019 playmat. And I think that's all my playmats at the moment. They kind of pile up after a while, Gotta figure out what to do with them now. I didn't have any at all for, years. And then now I've got, 5? It's weird. So, yeah. Had a great time at Vegas and got invited back again for the next year. And I was able to go. They changed the name from Grand Prix to MagicFest. So MagicFest 2019 Vegas. They also changed the date to be in August, which is a little more difficult for my schedule, but I made it. So after going to Gen Con in 2019, I went to MagicFest Vegas later on in the month. It was a busy month. Yeah, rambling on a bit here, but this is going to be a deck tech video, actually. And this is the deck that I played at the old school events in MagicFest Vegas 2019. And that's why I have this playmat and these sleeves, because that's what I used at that event. Try to keep it themed here. But before MagicFest Vegas 2019, let's back up to Gen Con. So, this deck right here, I had with me at Gen Con a few weeks before the Vegas event. So yeah, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to play at each event, leading up to them. And I think I had 3 decks. There was the black old school deck that I played at Gen Con. There was this one. And there was another one which was a red-green aggro deck with Berserk and Giant Growth and Bloodlust, things like that. It didn't turn out so well. I probably won't show you that when I've already taken it apart. It failed pretty spectacularly to removal spells. Not enough creatures, no blue, maybe it needs some counter magic to protect it. It just was a terrible deck. So I won't show you that one. But the other two, I already showed you the black one, and this is the next one. So I had this with me at Vegas, at Gen Con, trying it out, and here's what it looked like at the time. We have 4 Winter Orbs and 4 Howling Mines and 4 Relic Barriers. So, all low-cost artifacts. You can cast these with any color of mana and pretty quickly. Having 4 of each helps consistency in the deck. You know, you're more likely to draw what you need. More importantly, they both have a special interaction with Relic Barrier. So, back in the old days, when Magic was young, artifacts would shut off when they were tapped. Their abilities would stop working when they were tapped. Now, eventually this became pretty confusing, and the card designers forgot about it sometimes, which led to messy situations with rules interpretation and how cards actually worked. So, around 6th edition, they decided that they would get rid of that rule and stop allowing artifacts to shut off when they were tapped. Of course, that was also kind of messy because so many artifacts in the early game had been designed with the intention of shutting off when they were tapped. Like, it used to be that if you had a black vice, played against you, you could tap it with something like an Icy Manipulator or a Twiddle and avoid taking the damage because that artifact shut off. So that was pretty neat to be able to do things like that with Black Vice and Ivory Tower and the Rack and a variety of other artifacts. I think I mentioned Mana Crypt in another deck, or in another video. You could tap it to shut off the coin flip ability. There was just so many things you could do with that. Tapping artifacts was a wonderful ability to have. It made Icy Manipulator a great card. So these artifacts also shut off when they were tapped. But unlike all the other artifacts, these two have retained their ability to stop functioning when they're tapped. So, when that rules change was made in 6th edition, Howling Mine received errata to say that it would continue to shut off when it was tapped. They may have reworded that to say that it only works if it's untapped. I know it's been printed a few times and the exact wording might have changed, but you get the idea that they do basically the same thing. It was reprinted with the errata, the fixed text. Not a special printing, but just, as a regular, the next time it was printed, they printed it with the correct rules text. Unfortunately, Winter Orb was not reprinted for a very, very long time. So it became not a very good card because you couldn't activate and unactivate it anymore. It used to be great back in the day when 93, 94 was really, going on. And then it was not very good after the 6th edition rules change. And then many years later, eventually, when Eternal Masters was printed, they finally reprinted Winter Orb. And since it was being printed, they went ahead and updated the text to return its original functionality. And since then, it's been a great card again. Yay! Which means we can use it in Old School today the way that it used to be used way back then. And that's really what I wanted to do. So, I like that ability. I like abilities that you haven't seen for years. That things you can't do in other formats. Like prison decks. The Wizards of the Coast discourages that because it slows down the game. It's not good for tournament play. Also, land destruction. Same thing. It's not very interactive. Some people don't find it fun. But I like to see those unusual things. Heck, poison counters. That's a cool thing. To me, I like it. So, I like alternate win conditions and unusual things that you don't get to play in other formats. So, when I play Old School, I gravitate towards things that I can't do in other formats, like prison decks or land destruction. I like combo too. But back to these cards. So the way this works is that Winter Orb, a player may not untap more than one land during the untap phase of each of his or her turns. So this says each player can only untap one land. Enter Relic Barrier. The target artifact becomes tapped. So the way that works is you get both of them in play, you leave Winter Orb untapped during your opponent's untap step. Like, as you pass the turn, you make sure this is untapped, and then they only get to untap one land. And then sometime after that, in their turn, you use the Relic Barrier to tap the Winter Orb. It shuts off. It no longer functions. What that means is when it comes time for you to untap your cards, you get to untap all of them, including the Winter Orb and the Relic Barrier. Pretty much rinse and repeat. So every turn, your opponent gets to untap only one land, and you get to untap all of them. Huge advantage. That's a central combo of, a prison deck. Not all prison decks, of course, they're not all the same, but this is very much a prison theme. You're shutting down what your opponent can do. Similarly, Howling Mine. So, Howling Mine, each player must draw an extra card during their draw phase of each of his or her turns. Now, normally I don't like Howling Mine because your opponent gets to draw first. I've explained that before in one of my other deck tech videos. I tried to play with Howling Mine back in the 90s, and my opponent getting to draw the extra card before me screwed me over a lot. It just didn't work out for me. I had to stop playing with Howling Mine. But in this instance, I'm okay with Howling Mine because it shuts off when it's tapped. So, with Howling Mine and Relic Barrier both in play, all I have to do is tap it during my turn or during my opponent's upkeep, anytime before my opponent draws. And then, because it's tapped, it won't work for my opponent. They'll only get to draw their regular draw, probably one card. And then on my turn, I untap, and it is untapped for my own draw step, so I'll get to draw 2 cards. So it becomes very one-sided. And that's great for me. I get to draw an extra card every turn, and my opponent doesn't. So I really liked the way those cards work together. I like that they're low casting cost, and that they work with any color, because they're artifacts. So I looked at that, and I said, alright, I want to build a deck around that. That's my idea. I want to do that. I should also mention Relic Barrier is a pretty great card on its own, because Relic Barrier, in addition to this other things that it does, it's also a great defense against Mishra's Factories. So if your opponent activates their Mishra's Factory, either to attack or to block or whatever, you can tap it. Isn't that cool? The Relic Barrier is also handy for tapping mana-producing artifacts. You would probably want to tap your opponent's mana-producing artifacts. And the time that you would want to do that is during their upkeep, before their main phase. That way they don't have them during their main phase. Sure, they can, tap them in response and use the mana during their upkeep if they have something they can use it on. But, you're still restricting what they can do in their main phase, unless they have some kind of an upkeep cost that needs paid, or an instant in their hand, or maybe an artifact ability that they can use the mana on, like JM Day Tome or something. Then it's handy for mana denial. And mana denial is kind of the theme here with the whole Winter Orb going on. So it's okay to have multiple relic barriers. You got one working with your Winter Orb, and you have others that are tapping down their soul rings and their moxes to make sure that they don't have, non-land mana. So, moving on, the next card in this deck, Icy Manipulator. Only 3 of them this time, not 4. Icy Manipulator is a backup for Relic Barrier. It can also be used to tap these things. It can also be used to tap Artifact Mana or Mishra's Factories. Both of these also work on other artifact creatures like, say, Juggernaut or Su-Chi, Triskelion, things like that. Icy Manipulator is pretty great. It fits right in here. Now it has a higher casting cost, which is a bit of a bummer, but it does the job. More than that, Icy Manipulator can also tap lands. So that one land that they get to untap, you can tap it. That's it. That's a lock. That's what a prison deck does. It locks your opponent down so that they can't do anything. And this creates a situation where they untap one land, you tap it, they have nothing. No mana. They just sit there. Sure, it might be a boring game, but you get to win. Yay, I know that kind of deck just really isn't for some people. Some people don't like that. But like I said, I enjoy it because it's something you don't see in any other format. Yes, it can make for a long game sometimes, and sometimes not. And I don't enjoy it only because I'm playing it. I also enjoy playing against it. I just have fun playing. I'm okay if I don't win. I'm not a Spike. Although I do like to win, I try to win. That's the goal. So, Icy Manipulator. Artifacts and lands. It also works on creatures, even ones that aren't artifacts. So let's say your opponent has a Jazam Jin or a Shivan Dragon or who knows, a Curd Ape, whatever. You can use this to keep it tapped down. So if you have multiple Icy Manipulators, that's okay. You've got one tapping down their land. You've got the others tapping down any creatures that may happen to be out. So yeah, versatile cards, fit in any color deck. Next, I have 4 Underworld Dreams. Another card that I think's pretty fun. Pairs nicely with Howling Mine if you decide to let your opponent draw cards. Maybe you can wait and let them draw after you get the Underworld Dreams in play. How nice of you. So Underworld Dreams does 1 damage to the opponent for each card that he or she draws. It doesn't affect you, only your opponent, which is really nice. I put 4 of those in there. It gets crazy with things like Ancestral Recall or Time Twister or Wheel of Fortune. Draw cards. Even Howling Mine. And I know a lot of people like to draw cards, so that's kind of what I wanted to do, was give people some kind of a penalty for all the cards that I knew they wanted to draw. It also works with the Brain Geyser. It's good against Library of Alexandria and Sylvan Library, all that kind of stuff. Yes, Sylvan Library counts as drawing cards, even if you don't pay the life to keep them. It says right on the card, draw. So this means that apparently I'm going to have black in my deck. The triple black casting cost is pretty steep. So the next card I put in the deck is 4 Dark Rituals. Dark Ritual is a good card. If I have a Dark Ritual, turn 1, I can play things. I could play an Underworld Dreams turn 1, or These all cost 2, so there's a pretty good chance I could get them out. If I had a Mox or something, maybe I could get 2 of them out. So yeah, Dark Ritual really speeds up the deck. That helps. If you can lock the game before your opponent stabilizes, that's a good thing if you want to win, Next card, Juggernaut. Only 2 of them, but a nice card to attack your opponent with. You can make sure they don't have creatures with this, maybe. It also makes a nice disenchant target, because maybe you don't want your opponents targeting these things with their disenchants. And if they do, maybe you can still kill them with these. Juggernaut also doesn't die to the Abyss, which is something I put in this deck. Next card is Black Vice. So if my opponent doesn't have any lands untapped to be able to play stuff with, they're going to be accumulating a lot of cards in their hand, especially if I'm having them draw extra cards. So Black Vice, there's a win condition for me in addition to the Juggernauts. Low casting cost, works with any color. It's also a disenchant target. Like, my opponent can only have 4 disenchants, and that's, if they're playing white. I've got a lot of artifacts here. So there's only so much they can do to get rid of these. Black Vice is also pretty good against control decks. Works great against anyone that wants to try to keep 7 cards in their hand, like if they're playing Library of Alexandria, or if you're playing an Ivory Tower kind of a deck. Black Vice is pretty good to counter what they're trying to do, So the next cards are Mishra's Workshop. A couple of those. They tap to provide 3 colorless mana that can only be used to cast artifacts. Well, I have a lot of artifacts, so that works for me. Then 3 Mana Vaults. So this is like the Dark Ritual of artifacts. You pay 1, you get 3 mana. It's a speed thing. It ramps out your deck. Makes you, more able to empty your hand turn 1 or whatever. Lots of speedy mana. Play fast, lock the game, win. Your opponent will appreciate it if you don't take forever. Next cards are Mox Pearl, Mox Emerald, Mox Ruby, and Mox Jet. More speedy mana. Sorry I couldn't play all Mox Jets, but it's restricted, so there's no Sapphire because I don't own a Sapphire. It would be a wonderful addition if someone had one to put in a deck like this. Next card is Badlands. So, a land that can make some mana. So it can make black mana, which is handy if I want to play these black spells. I should probably have more black mana than that. And that's what City of Brass is for. So 4 Arabian City of Brass cards. Alright, now I have 9 sources of black mana. So that's something. Maybe I'll be able to cast the Dark Ritual if I happen to get it. Or it's kind of a lot of work to play the Underworld Dreams for 3 mana if I only have 9 here. So maybe it's a late game play. Whatever, we'll see. It's not the main theme, it's kind of a side, something I added in. Next we have Demonic Tutor. Get anything, whatever combo piece you need, probably. Or maybe an answer, if you're having some kind of a situation you need fixed. Mind Twist. With all this fast mana, an early Mind Twist is nice. Wheel of Fortune. This is to refill your hand because you're going to burn through your hand really fast with all this fast mana. So it refills your hand. In addition to that, it works with the Underworld Dreams. If you have an Underworld Dreams out and you Wheel of Fortune, your opponent's going to be taking 7 damage. That's pretty nice. Chaos Orb. That solves problems. If you can flip it good. And I can't flip it very good. I need to practice. But I keep it in the deck anyway, because that's how you practice, right? Next is... Let's play the 2 Abyss cards. The Abyss. So this is the defense against creatures. You know, your opponent is probably going to play some creatures. Maybe they're going to be low casting cost creatures, something they can get out before you get this working. Because this is, you know, it's a combo deck, basically, right? Combo prison. So the Abyss is going to be taking out their creatures, 1 every turn, and if you keep their mana under control, they're going to run out of creatures for this to kill. The neat thing here is it doesn't kill your Juggernaut. So you could have creatures while they don't. Pretty good situation to be in. It doesn't kill Mishra's Factories. But like I said, the Relic Barriers and the Icy Manipulators tap down Mishra's Factories if they activate them. Well, the Icy Manipulator will do it even if they don't activate them. Next card, Tabernacle at Pendril Vale. This also gets rid of creatures. It particularly helps against weenie decks. Someone that plays a bunch of small creatures. Now they have to pay 1 upkeep for each creature. And that's really hard to do with Winter Orb going on. So that's going to be killing creatures also. So this is creature destruction. This is my defense. Next is 2 Fireballs. These are here for something to do with all of this mana late game. So if I happen to be sitting around with some untapped mana vaults or some Dark Rituals stuck in my hand, I've got nothing to do with them, this gives me something to do with them. It could be used for removal. It's probably going to be a game finisher. Next is Red Elemental Blast. With all of these artifacts, I became concerned about a card called Energy Flux. Energy Flux makes each artifact have an upkeep cost of 2. And that would be terrible for me. So Red Elemental Blast is here to battle against Energy Flux if it happens to show up. You know, a lot of people play blue, so I was concerned that I might see some Energy Flux. If they're not playing it, or if they're not playing blue, I can always sideboard these out. But they're also handy against things like Ancestral Recall, which a ton of people play, right? You know, Time Twister, Time Walk, just blue cards. Even counter spells. I can counter their counterspell. So it's a versatile card. And it also protects me against, you know, the thing that I fear. Next is Soul Ring. A little more quick mana. And then 2 Swamps. So yeah, I wanted some basic lands that make black mana in case my opponent played Blood Moon, because I recognize that Blood Moon could be a little bit of an issue for my black cards. Now, it's not a problem at all for my red ones, because it makes these into mountains and I can still play my red cards. But I wanted something to be able to play my black stuff if my opponent was playing Blood Moon. Now this is what the deck looked like when I took it to Gen Con. Let me go through the sideboard real quick. That's this right here. The sideboard was 2 more Red Elemental Blasts and 4 active Volcanoes. Now this was because I was just really concerned about Energy Flux, like that shuts me down. So it's kind of a big deal. If you're not familiar with Active Volcano, it says destroy target blue permanent or return target island to owner's hand. So, you know, that's handy. mana denial theme, and also against getting rid of blue permanents, like Energy Flux. The other cards here in my sideboard are 4 Lightning Bolts. They're here for the purpose of removal, mainly. I can always sideboard them in place of the Red Elemental Blasts, or other things, if something's not going my way. 2 more Juggernauts. Like if I find out my opponent's playing a creatureless deck, maybe I want some more Juggernauts. And 3 basic Swamps in my sideboard. This is extra protection against Blood Moon. It's a great card, so I was concerned that I might see some of it. Okay, so yeah, that's sideboard. That's how it looked going into Gen Con, and I played the mono black deck that I showed you in the other video in the big old school Gen Con tournament. That was hosted by Ed Arneson. I forget the official name of the tournament. I think it has one. Old school something. And so I played the black one in that event, but there were other old school tournaments played inside the Gen Con exhibit hall. I think it was called Pastimes or something like that. And they had an old school event, I think 3 days, something like that. And so I tried to play this deck in one of those events. And I played the red-green deck I mentioned in one of the other events there. And I also played all of the decks against various people for casual games. But I played this one probably the most against Guillaume and Raphael. And they were pretty impressed by it. And we had a lot of really good games, some close matches. I think they were playing control decks. So it was an interesting battle. That's pretty much how that went. So after that experience of, playing it at Gen Con against various people, I decided to change a few things before taking this to MagicFest Vegas. One of the things that I became concerned about was Nevinyrral's Disc. I ran into that in the tournament that I played the black deck in. I ran into a lot of Troll Disco decks, and Nevinyrral's Disc was something that also was not good for me. And so I wanted to put in some kind of artifact removal, because just tapping a disc isn't enough. They can activate it in response to me targeting it. And there's just no way to avoid it by tapping it. So I needed some kind of removal, and I would also need to use the removal the first turn the disc came into play, because it comes into play tapped. Anytime after that, they can activate it and get around whatever I'm trying to do. So I definitely needed some artifact removal. That became important. Disenchant is the best artifact removal, but I just couldn't see trying to squeeze white into this deck. So I went with Shatter. I guess let me get out these other cards here and we will see how I changed this deck after trying it out. I changed it for the MagicFest Vegas tournament. So I took out the Juggernauts, the Underworld Dreams, and the Dark Rituals. The Underworld Dreams was just kind of difficult to play. It was neat when I got it out, but it was not the main strategy. It was not focused enough. And too many times I had it in my hand and couldn't play it. Late game it just didn't do as much for me. And the Dark Rituals were mainly here to support that heavy black casting cost, because the rest of these only have 1 black mana. There just isn't enough black mana in the deck to support that, I feel. So that had to go. And this also went in favor of some other things. I also took out the Red Elemental Blasts. I know that sounds odd, but I think I put them in the sideboard. I'll figure that out in a minute here. Let me just move them down here. Okay, so here's what went in 2 Blood Moons. Yes, Blood Moon is a good card. I was concerned that I would be playing against it. I decided that I'm okay if a Blood Moon gets played. Like, a lot of my cards are red, and I do have a way to get some black mana, and I don't have very many black cards. So I think I can live through a Blood Moon, especially if it just wins me games. And Blood Moon can win games. There's a lot of people that play dual lands, and you make all their dual lands red and they can't cast anything. That's mana denial, which is what this deck is trying to do. My next addition was 3 Strip Mines. That is more mana denial. Again, that's what this deck is trying to do. So I took out the Underworld Dreams and the Dark Ritual, which weren't super focused, and I put cards in that are more focused on what I'm trying to do here. Now, Strip Mine is a land, and it does provide mana, but I have it in this deck as a land removal card. I'm not really planning to use it for mana. I'm considering this to be kind of like a land destruction spell. That's the intended use when I get that in this deck. The next thing is Mishra's Factories. I like to play one of each artwork. That's just my style. It's probably not the best choice. It would be better strategically to play all the same artwork. That way, if your opponent ever sees your hand, and then you have to discard at random, and then they see your hand again, they won't know if the card they saw is the same one they saw before or a different copy. Yeah, I know that sounds kind of far-fetched. It's kind of a corner case, but it does occasionally happen. So there's that minor bit of strategic advantage there if you're into that. I just find the different artworks to be cool and pretty. So, yeah, Mishra's Factory. Instead of the Juggernauts, I'm using this as my creature. It also survives the Abyss, and it also defends against opposing Mishra's Factories. This also defends against opposing Mishra's Factories. It's something I became concerned about. There was a lot of Mishra's Factories being played. So, one of the best defenses against Mishra's Factory is having your own Mishra's Factory and some Strip Mines. Alright, next is another Mana Vault. Having gotten rid of the Dark Rituals, I've added that. And this next one was awkward. This is 2 Mishra's Workshops. Now, I don't own 4 Mishra's Workshops, and I needed to play this deck in an event that doesn't allow proxies. So, what was I going to do? And I kind of struggled over that. And I visited with Edwin about a few different things. One of the things I was talking about was Su-Chi versus Juggernaut. We were talking about that leading up to the event. And he offered to let me borrow some Mishra's Workshops for this deck while we were together in Vegas. Now, I had never borrowed Magic cards from anyone before, so that's a weird thing for me. I mean, I know lots of people do it. It's kind of a normal thing, but for me, I don't play with other people's cards. That's just not something that I do. But I did need them, and I did appreciate the offer, and I think it really makes the deck a lot better. So, knowing that he was okay with that and offered to do that, I said okay. I accepted that loan, and he was just gonna give them to me at the event, I didn't need them right away. But I went ahead and planned on having 4 Mishra's Workshops for the deck. Now, just to keep them straight, I actually put my initials on this card sleeve here so that I would know which one was mine, because that's something I was concerned about. Like, I wanted mine back and I wanted him to get his back and not mix them up. So, how do I do that? I decided I would just put my initials on a sleeve. So, there we go. That changed things a bit. Now, I also changed the sideboard some. The sideboard became no active volcanoes. Those left. These red elemental blasts out of the deck went into the sideboard. 4 shatters went into the sideboard. So this is against Energy Flux, and this is against Nevinyrral's Disc. The 4 Underworld Dreams I actually put into the sideboard. Maybe that wasn't the best choice, but that's where they ended up at. The Dark Rituals were gone. 3 Lightning Bolts. I believe that's what the sideboard was. Yes, just check my notes. That is what the sideboard was. So these other cards here, gone. Guess I could spread those out so you could see them a little better, huh? Okay, there we go. Sideboard. All right. So this is how I took it to Vegas, with some empty slots for the cards I was borrowing for Edwin, but like this, intending to test it out some more before we actually played in the event. We tested it out in the hotel room. We had this great event where it was half poker tournament, half old school Magic tournament, and we all got prizes for that. Sealed old school packs and some collector's edition cards. If I'd have been thinking, I would have had them handy and I could have shown you. It was a lot of fun. We played poker with an ex-Magic player that's now a professional poker player. Had a great time. There was a special prize for anyone that could beat Brian Weissman, and one person managed to do it for at least one game. I don't think this is the deck that I played that night of the poker event, but I did play it against people, testing it out before the official tournament for MagicFest. I talked with everyone that was there, Daniel and Edwin, and I think they each made videos going over this deck. What we ended up doing, Edwin's suggestion, was getting rid of 1 Black Vice and adding a Blood Moon, and getting rid of 1 City of Brass and adding a Felwar Stone, and getting rid of a Mana Vault and adding a Felwar Stone, and getting rid of 3 Mana Vaults and adding 3 Triskelion. That was what Edwin suggested, and that is what I ended up playing at the events. We had the on-site event, and we also had an off-site event at a local game store. The extra Blood Moon is just another Blood Moon. I kind of explained how Blood Moon interacts here. And I'm totally okay if I turn a bunch of my non-basic lands into mountains. If these turn into basic mountains, then they're mountains. So what? That's okay. I can still use them. And if my opponent gets rid of the Blood Moon, which of course they're going to be trying to do, then now I've got some cool lands back. So I'm okay either way. I can play both sides of the Blood Moon. It works for me. That was an interesting, realization for me that hey, it's okay if I turn my own non-basics into mountains. I can live with that, especially if it really hurts what my opponent's trying to do. It's worth it if it shuts them down. And if they manage to be not shut down, then I just go back to having a bunch of great lands. The Triskelion, I was a little skeptical about that. It has a high casting cost of 6. I mean, yeah, I can cast it. I have a lot of mana. But it's a 4/4, basically for 6 mana, which doesn't seem great. But when I played with it, it really was really good. So if you're skeptical about Triskelions, maybe give them a shot. It's really cool that this can attack for 4 and then instantly do 3 more damage. That's 7 points, which is like a third of their life total. That's something. It's also great for the utility of getting rid of little 1/1 things, because you can do the direct damage with it. It was just a very versatile card. I enjoyed having it. It added some interaction that was fun. And then the Felwar Stones. I was a little iffy on that one also, because my thoughts were like, if the goal is to provide me with black mana, because I need some black mana when Blood Moon's out, then I could just play a couple swamps, and swamps don't have a casting cost. I can play swamps for free as my land for the turn, instead of having to pay 2. So, like, isn't it better to have swamps? But Edwin convinced me to try the Felwar Stones, and I did also enjoy those. He said that the metagame would be heavy with black, and that was a very accurate call. There were a lot of black decks being played in the official event inside the convention center. Not as many over at the local game store, which was an awesome event. The local game store event had a huge variety of players and decks. A lot of fun things were going on there. And man, I was exhausted. I had been up pretty much all night. I might have had an hour of sleep or something. Oh man, I was falling asleep like halfway through the tournament at the table. So it definitely wasn't my best games, but for the moments that I was awake, I had a great time. And met a lot of fun people, and I wish I could go back and do it again and see them all again and be awake, because I think that would be better for everyone. But yeah, good times. And the Felwar Stone did end up being useful. I mean, sure, it makes other colors of mana also if my opponent has other colors of mana, but I don't usually need other colors. Like black and red's my thing. It does provide a little bit of ramp. It untaps under the Winter Orb. I think that was the thing that made it handy. It's more artifact mana, so the Winter Orb doesn't affect it. That's pretty much how the deck works and worked. Had a lot of fun playing it, and I wanted to show it to all of you and explain, how all that works. And eventually, I kind of evolved this idea into another deck, but it was a significant enough of a change that I wouldn't call it like the same deck anymore. The idea was Blood Moon is good, and the Abyss is good, and I was really worried about Energy Flux ruining this deck. And I thought, what if I played a deck that had those 3 cards? Like 4 copies of each. Just in case they get rid of one. It's kind of like a hate deck, just shut stuff down. But it didn't have anything to do with this, and it's vastly different from this deck. It was just sort of an idea that sprung from playing this. So maybe I'll show you that other deck in the future. But this is this deck, and its focus is right here. Shutting down mana with Winter Orb. I guess that's about it. I don't know what else to say here. It's a lot of fun. I recommend trying this out. And maybe we'll play some games sometime. I need to practice more with this, because I like it. One more quick thing before I go. At MagicFest Vegas, I received this playmat. Pretty cool. Boy, it looks so textured in the video. Huh. Interesting. It's flat. Anyway, so this is based on a Legends booster pack, and yeah, it says GP still, even though the name was changed to MagicFest, but that's alright. Old School Championship GP Vegas 2019. I was there, participated, got the playmat. It's pretty cool. I really like the Magic Booster Pack theme on these playmats. The 2018 one was an Arabian Nights pack theme. Incredibly popular playmat. I didn't play that year, I didn't bring a deck, so I don't have the playmat, but several of my friends picked one up, and it's pretty popular. I've also seen an Antiquities one, and one that looks like a beta, core set. Yeah, I don't know if they'll make one for the dark or not. Maybe they're done. Seems like they ought to make one for the dark. Anyway, just wanted to share this playmat that came from that event. That's it.